I've got lots of questions I can ask, but I'm hoping that this is a good opportunity for you guys to ask any questions that you've thought of today, or just generally anything to these guys specifically. So just firstly, I'm just going to ask them to do a very quick introduction of themselves, and then we'll get into some questions. Try and start at that end.
Can you hear me? So I'm Travis Winstanley. I'm a co-founder and games investment director of Kuju Startups. We're based here in London, part of Kuju Entertainment, and we invest in essentially indie studios, bringing new projects to market. So we've got a portfolio of 3 companies that we're currently supporting. One called Fiddlesticks, producing a game called Hue, which is award-winning. We've got another one called Aero, which is also award-winning, and a third one, which is also award-winning, which is called Jumpstars, which we've just completed just before Christmas. And we're actively investing in the space over the course of the year.
Hi, I'm Phil. I run a platform called Enix Collective. We try to help indie devs at various points, really. We help them to build community before they go to crowdfunding. We can also support crowdfunding campaigns directly with due diligence and marketing support. We can then take care of distribution and publishing stuff when they're ready to release. We're also investing into production in a few titles as well. So we're trying to be very much a service provider as opposed to a traditional publisher. Yeah, no awards yet though, so damn.
Hello, I'm Simon. I'm Publishing Director at Curve Digital. Curve historically has been known for helping indie creators bring their games to consoles. So the first sort of wave of games that we published were Thomas Was Alone on PlayStation, Xbox. We've done The Swapper, Proteus, Lone Survivor. Last year we worked with Dan Marshall on The Swindle, Pumped BMX Plus, that sort of thing. I think where we slightly differ from other publishers is that we've got in-house dev resource. So historically, we've worked from original code, be that in Unity, in-house engines, that sort of thing. We work at optimizing all of the code across each of the platforms, and then in an ideal world, we'll publish across platforms simultaneously. We've just been acquired by the Catalyst Group, so me and Travis are bros, new bros, exactly. Yeah. We're actually publishing Hue, which will be available later, the award-winning Hue, which will be out later, and hoping to work much more closely with Travis and his team.
Hi, I'm Jeff Matsushita. I'm with WG Cells. We are a newly minted mobile initiative for wargaming. We have both internal and external development, so we are both a studio and a publisher. We have development assets that are in both Kiev and in Seattle. We have about 3.5 teams that are developing original content, and I'm in charge of working with the rest of you to bring new titles to market, as well as provide publishing services for titles that are nearing launch. So,
I'm Jeff Hilbert. I'm a founder and board member of DDM, and I'm also doing a lot of independent consulting. DDM's an agency. They primarily represent video game development studios to secure development funding. Last year, we secured over $150 million of development funding. They also manage Kickstarters. They've done a couple of Kickstarters. All of them exceed $3 to $4 million, so they operate in that range. As far as the development deals go for funding, they range from $500,000 to about, I think, $35 million. So that's where they operate. And then I work personally with a couple of studios where I join their executive staff, where I help them secure game development funding and investment, which seems to be going a little bit nutty right now in Korea and China. So we're getting a lot of investment out of Korea and China right now for game studios, and that's what I do.
Okay, so I'm going to kick off with a question. We've done a lot of talking today about raising money, but working in this space isn't just about the money. What is, question as a developer, what is it that the people that you're going to be working with, can bring as well as money? So, to you guys, what is it that you do that you add to companies, and in particular, what sort of companies can you really help, aside from the money that you provide?
Since I have the mic, I'll just go ahead and I'll try to keep it brief because I know we don't have that much time. But basically, the bottom line is we have the resources of a larger organization, not only in terms of assets, obviously money, but we have expertise in UA and marketing. typical publishing kind of activities that we can do. We can help work with the teams to optimize your monetization, so we will help manage your soft launch process and help drive the analytics and the BI through that. So if you're a developer that maybe doesn't have as much familiarity there, the kinds of things that we could do would be to do that. And I don't want to think too much of a sales pitch, but I think that is effectively what a publisher should be able to do. So I think in that respect, we're not doing anything special. I think we just happen to have a lot of good folks that can do it.
I think where Curve has historically offered the most value has been in helping devs who were concentrating on usually a PC lead version get across to console. I think it was Rami who said in his talk down in Brighton last year that Unity and similar technologies will get you a lot of the way there, but actually getting through the submissions process is actually really difficult. We've got huge experience in terms of working out even simple things like UI, screen ratios, all of those sort of things are what you need to think when you're moving across to different console formats, memory management, that sort of thing. So all of the boring stuff, really. You guys make the games, and we sort of help get it across to console. So historically, that's what we've done alongside the things mentioned, things like taking titles to shows, marketing, PR support, all that sort of thing. I think what we're going to see moving forward is a real change, because expectations for indie games are moving all the time, and so what our recent news, being acquired by the Catalyst Group, will bring is actually some additional resource behind us, so that we're able to sort of help support financially where we've not sort of previously done that before.
So for us, I think we're a bit different in that we don't necessarily need to be everyone's partner. If I don't think that we're the best opportunity or best option for someone, then I'll introduce them to someone who I think is. I'm in a unique position because Collective doesn't have to be driven by the same kind of, I think, financial pressure that maybe other teams do, because obviously we sit within the structure of a big corporation, so I'm quite lucky. But obviously the main thing for us is marketing. We can open up access to expertise from companies like EDAR and Petrol Advertising in the US. They work on some of the biggest games in the industry, but they also have a great track record for working with smaller teams, and we can access their services at cost. So we look at trying to bring in like-minded people with great expertise to do it in a way that incentivizes them into the developer's success. And at every point, the developer will always retain IP. They always retain creative control. That's not just a line, that's built into the agreements. So, we're trying to do something a little bit differently. And ultimately, we're trying to help people build up their own IP so that they can then go on and actually be more independent next time around. And I guess hopefully not need us for game number 2.
I'm conscious that sort of me and Simon are sitting in a similar camp, so there might be a bit of overlap. But I think it's also worth just touching on what we don't do. And we don't kind of impose our views, having made an investment, on how a game is going to be developed. Ultimately, it's down to the developers to own that creative vision and kind of deliver on it. We sort of like to trust our developers to do that. I think sort of the other key thing is building up the game, I suppose it's brand appeal. But also the developers themselves, making them the superstars of the game itself. So really sort of focusing on making sure that they're present at various shows, making sure they're attending various marketing events, is something that we sort of build into the funding we provide, along with all of the production support and business contacts and so on that you get with a large corporation.
And we kind of come from the other end of the spectrum. We work with the development studios to say, what's your roadmap? Where do you guys want to be in 2 to 5 years? Do we want to do contract development? Do we want to raise capital? If we do raise capital, what control are you going to give up? What aren't you going to give up? Do we want a strategic investor? Don't you want a strategic investor? And we run the gambit. And sometimes we just look at a development studio and say, you're not really ready to be funded. However, here's a $15 million contract development gig for you guys to become an expert in a genre. Once you become the expert in that genre, then it makes it much easier for us to go out and raise capital or partner with a strategic. And the difference between a strategic might be somebody like a Tencent or an NCSoft who is going to provide you with services and territories that you don't work with, and they'll help you roll out your product, they'll help you teach you how to monetize, they'll help you with things like that. But other than that, you pretty much have your own money, and you get to do what you want if you want to build your own publisher, if you want to partner with somebody. So I kind of come from the opposite end of the spectrum with these guys, where it is they cut the checks, we get the checks and help position it to get the money.
Are there any questions from the audience yet, or shall I carry on? Yeah.
Say if you had a game, sort of like a concept idea, and it needed like 250k, what would be the best direction to go? Would it be like Innovate UK grant? Or like, would you go for pitch it to publish, I guess? Because recently I did a university project, and it was with a group, and we pitched sort of like a Spyro game, but with cats, and you had to collect presents and fishes throughout the levels, and it was themed around Christmas. But we did a presentation, but for the commercial awareness, we got like a C, sort of, because we didn't have like.
Okay, I don't think you need to pitch the game right now.
Okay, yeah.
You guys, the question was, where does one go to get 250k to fund a game? Is that the question?
That's the question. Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Have you shipped a game before?
No.
Do you have a development studio?
Yeah, no.
Do you have any experience in the game
a
industry?
student.
Okay. I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, so I guess my big question is, obviously as a publisher, there's always going to be a sense of we want to know what we're going to be investing in. So, obviously Jeff referred to it, there's going to be some value to the team. We have to know a little bit about what kind of value you can provide. So if you have a prototype, that's obviously something we can assess and review. You asked about grants. I know that every country has their own set of grants. In fact, I've spoken to a lot of individuals here today who have said they've been self-funded by the grants that they have, and they're able to bring a prototype to a publisher and begin talking about exactly what they have. But Jeff's right. I mean, there is a level of sort of evidence that we have to show that the investment will pay itself back. So we're unfortunately, unlike governments, we don't grant money just for fun. Actually, I don't think they do it either. But anyway, we are looking for ways to get our investment back. So when you think about you're asking for $250,000, what you should really be positioning it as is here's an opportunity to make $1 million. It's going to cost you $250,000 to make it, and so you have to be able to justify how to make that money, and that's really the key.
Yeah, so I'd recommend doing as much networking with other devs. Whereabouts are you based?
I'm a student in Brunel University at the moment.
Okay,
MA game design, yeah.
So obviously spend as much time as you can going to events like this, talking to people who are, maybe 3-4 years into the industry, and build up a network of contacts. You will need something. A concept idea isn't enough. So understanding the steps you need to take to the point where you can then go and pitch. Making sure that you have the capability, making sure that you can demonstrate that capability is absolutely crucial, though. Getting feedback from other people who are already doing what you want to do can be super useful because you can also get contacts and introductions from those people as well. So think about how to branch out and how to build that network around you and your team.
So just a quick one. I think probably the question is better positioned if we say, what do I look for in a particular game or a particular company? And typically I look at kind of 3 key areas. One is the game itself and whether it's unique and it's got some kind of unique qualities. The second one is the team, whether the team have the track record, the experience and so on. And then thirdly, looking at the market. So one, you take that game to the market, whether it's going to be in a sort of a large space or whether it's super niche. So being able to, in your own mind, tick off those little boxes and say, actually, if I was an investor, I would be able to successfully back this game. Then you're kind of more likely to kind of get a check written from anyone. And I think it's probably worth diving into some of those kind of details? It's just because in order to build up that experience, you maybe have to go through a couple of first few steps, maybe getting a grant, maybe talking to devs in the industry, just to kind of to get to that stage.
And I don't know how big meetups are here, but I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and there's meetups all the time. And a lot of university students go to those meetups, and they start to find like-minded people like, oh, I'm a designer, you're a programmer, you're this. But it all comes down to, if you're a student and you haven't delivered anything, you better have a great prototype. You have to have, I don't know how the grants work over here either, but you have to have a great prototype. But that really goes for anyone in this room, whether you're a startup or not a startup. The great prototype they're going to look at your experience. the less experience you have, the further you need to be on a particular game. But a lot of guys in this room, I see a couple of guys I know here that have delivered hit after hit after hit. That's effectively a prototype.
Just to very quickly answer your question about the grants, no, Innovate UK, because that's specifically for technology development. So unless you're building an engine, it's not for game development. The UK Games Fund is probably the best option for grant funding for you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Any other questions from the audience?
Hi guys, how you doing? Came a little late, but this question is really focused towards funding. And I understand an inexperienced new developer and startup company would be sort of looked upon and say, well, what's your background, what's your experience, does this really work? But what if you've got a model and you've done all your groundwork, you've partnered with a company already, your channel distribution is in place, and the only thing you're in need of is a partnership perhaps, or funding and a partnership to extend what you've built. So you can deploy within a month's time, but having the backing of a VC and experienced people as not just mentors, but also having access to the right companies to further build and scale your company. Is that something you guys have ever considered doing?
I think that's what we all do, isn't it?
Yeah, to a certain extent, we kind of do business development and so on. But I also think it's fair to say that VCs typically, I'm sort of talking generally here, aren't there to build your own business for you. So if you haven't got the sort of the roadmap planned for yourself, then don't expect someone to come in with investment and also run the whole show. You need to make sure you've got that sort of ready to take it on.
Like, I'm just asking if you already have all of that in place, and you then go into a company, but you're not known in the industry. You know, it's like, I don't know. Imagine some guy who's just popped up with a really awesome piece of technology where it's, in an ideal world, the games you actually play, the reward system gives you real-world goods, services, products, and solutions, rather than just intrinsic value. And you've developed something that brings intrinsic and extrinsic value into an industry-agnostic platform.
So, I mean, my 2 cents, and this is sort of a non-answer, but my 2 cents is that if you have a model that you are convinced is absolutely successful, why would you want to come to us, right? At the end of the day, that's sort of a lot of times we look at individual games and individual titles, and if somebody's absolutely convinced that they have a way of making money, if they have an LTV that's like $30 for their game, you can get a loan out on your house, and you could probably pay for the acquisition of users against a $30 LTV game, right? And so you can actually begin making your own money. You don't have to have a publisher or VC to back you. If you're looking to get contacts in the industry, that really depends on what industry you're looking at, right? If you're talking about something with real goods, maybe you should be talking to somebody like Amazon, right? Or any other kind of retail company. So it really depends on the space you're talking about. I don't think it's necessarily going to be exclusive to games if you're trying to do something really, really strange and innovative. Not really strange, but you get my bit.
I understand.
Anyone else?
Any ideas on?
No, I mean, I was just to say, for us, we don't really look at platforms and tech in that way. It's really, we're trying to support new IP and new talent coming into the industry. So from that perspective, you don't necessarily need to have a track record. The 2 teams that we've actually invested in haven't shipped games previously. But one thing for us is I would actually flip it around, and if you've gone too far down the road of building something specific, in some ways that might worry me slightly. I'd really then want to do a lot of due diligence on what you've built to make sure that it is what you think it is, and it is going to do what you think it's going to do based on our experience. So I don't think for us it's necessarily relevant to you, but if people have gone down, I mean, we want to look for capability. We want people to be looking at what it is their game needs in order to be successful, absolutely. But at the same time, I think for us, if we're going to be a good partner, we want to be in a position to be able to advise and actually offer insight. So, yeah, I mean, it's obviously entirely dependent on the details, I guess.
Appreciate that.
Anything to add? Okay. Any other questions?
I'm sorry. If you want to meet people in the industry, you're at the right place. Go from booth to booth. I mean, it sounds like you have a technology solution for people that are already publishing a game. You just need the games. Is that?
Oh no, I've already got I'm already in the gaming environment with with I've partnered with a company already for that purpose.
Okay,
Well,
then yeah,
so,
then I'd
yeah.
go booth to booth.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We'll probably have to wrap up fairly soon, but we can probably do one more if somebody's got a question. Okay,
No one needs money.
Okay, I've got a question then, just to wrap up. How do you see the funding landscape changing over the next 5 years? Just to, end on a light note.
I think specifically in the area which we tend to operate, what we're seeing is that it's very difficult to make a real impact on your own. People have made their own games sort of part-time, and they've been great successes, and we all know those people that are household names. Unfortunately, we're now at the stage where we're sort of second, third cycle of people who've come on board at that point, and the market has changed dramatically since then. So from our side, we're definitely seeing the need that people are requiring funding to make sure that their sort of production values match their ambition. And that funding can vary. There are loads of different ways to create what you're aiming to create. You don't need to throw hundreds of thousands at it. You can do it very low cost. But it's certainly clear that if it's not just sort of finishing funding or slightly more ambitious levels, definitely at the other end, I think, in the traditional games sense, if I can refer to it as that, in the mobile world, you're spending a lot of money on marketing and user acquisition. You don't need to be that dramatic in terms of console PC games specifically, but actually having that backing behind you to throw a bit of weight so that you can make a bit more of an impression than some of the games that are coming up on Steam. When Curve published Stealth Bastard, it was the only game on Steam only game on Steam that day. When we published the sequel last year, there were 24 that day, and I think that's the market that we're operating at the money. So the funding landscape in terms of helping you create, that's one side of things, but then on the flip side as well, how are you going to make sure that people know about that? I think we're going to see a lot more investment needed in that sense.
Yeah, curation is going to be the watchword for the next however many years you want to insert in there, N. I think crowdfunding is going to be an interesting one. It's obviously still pretty immature with respect to how long it's been around, and there have been some big successes, but the shape of the way that's working now is, there's more money going to bigger projects, known IP, known developers, and, something which was on paper an ideal place for people to test new ideas and for newcomers into the industry, they're getting more and more squeezed out. So I hope that over the next 12 months, I'm not sure if we can even say 5 years for crowdfunding, but over the next 12 months, I hope that more stability comes there. But if that's a route you're thinking of, then you've absolutely got to manage your expectations, have multiple sources of funding in place. I'd recommend.
I think probably what's going to change is there are going to be more routes to funding. We talked about crowdfunding, we've spoken about government grants, we've talked about sort of all of our funding propositions here, and I don't think that's going to change. Well, you're going to get more of that. What isn't going to change, I think, is what makes a successful product, and you still need to focus on making a really high-quality game, making sure that you are sort of top of your game compared to everyone else who's out there. But also thinking about if you're making a game today, where it's going to be in a month or a year's time when it actually comes to launch, or indeed when you're kind of servicing your user base that are still playing your game. So I think making sure you are aware of the business environment is probably where the biggest changes are going to happen, and making sure you're bringing funding on, which it matches that.
And I just want to comment one thing on crowdfunding. We did a lot of research on crowdfunding, and as soon as you get above £300,000 to try and raise on crowdfunding, the single most important factor for success is IP. Period. Bar none. You will not, it's safe to say, you will not raise money unless you have IP. Now, IP could be an individual, an IP, or a company, or something, because it all goes down to, it's no different than mobile. You need to drive traffic. There's a certain ratio that people will come over if you build your Kickstarter or your crowdfunding correctly, which is another thing. N% will convert, but they have to come to your site. And it's a matter of getting them to your site. And if you're going to launch a Kickstarter or crowdsourcing, you better have a great PR campaign or something to drive users to your campaign. I think it's like 3% of the people that come will actually fund. So when you start to look at your money, just run that number and say, all right, if I have to raise £1 million
and the average contribution is going to be 10 pounds. How many people do I need to drive to my site? And when you do that math, it gets really scary. So, but people do it all the time. Every day, someone gets funded, and what did they do to get funded?
Cool. Right, I think we're going to leave it there then. Thank you very much, all of you, and thanks everyone for coming along.